because it's going to be a management nightmare and a paper. I'm not going to get onto that. I'm going to leave it to our expert speakers. And I'm Patrick O'Leary, Managing Editor of FleetWatch Magazine. And please, if you have questions, there is a column on the right. And if we can't answer the question due to time constraints during the webinar, we will answer the questions afterwards, and everybody will get them by email. So what I'm going to do is, without further ado, I'm going to pass on to the gorgeous Alta Swanepoel, and Alta is going to lead us through some pertinent points that you need to take account of when preparing to get ready for AARTO. Alta, over to you. Alta, you just switch your camera on and your sound on, and then we are there. There we go. Thank you. Hello, Alta. Yeah, we got you. Your blonde hair looks lovely, by the way. I'm out of here before I get into trouble.
Thank you very much. I think my hairdresser was a little over enthusiastic, but thank you very much. Morning, everyone. I was told to do a 3.5-hour presentation in 15 minutes. So here goes. Apologies. Patrick always says I speak too fast, but literally today I have to. I was asked to. Let's start with the update. First of all, the question that everybody has, the legislation has not been published yet. I have it on good authority. I spoke to some of the guys at DOT yesterday, and they are still publishing before the 1st of October, and they are still going ahead with everything as is. The regulations have been finalized, they've been translated, everything. So we are just waiting for the publication. We will let you know as soon as we hear anything. The minister said on the 1st of July, phase 1 is to get everything ready. So the slide there in front of you just shows you the different dates and the different municipalities. The way I understand it is there will be provisions in the legislation that will indicate the municipalities that will be published from 1 October. That sounds like in the entire Gauteng, they already had it, most of Gauteng already had it for the last 13 years, most of the Western Cape and KZN. And then all the main centers in the country. And then January, they would roll it out to the rest of the municipalities, the smaller municipalities out there. And then in July next year, there will be the Demerit Point system, which would also be phased. So the Demerit Points won't come into force all on the same day, but that is at this stage still, it seems, how it's going to be. To be able to do that, the president needs to sign a proclamation implementing AARTO in the rest of the country, and also mainly as far as the Amendment Act is concerned, to also implement the Amendment Act with all the new provisions in. Now, I am assuming that most of you are aware of all the provisions in the AARTO legislation, so I'm just going to run through a few update things that's there. The main presentation, unfortunately, literally takes 3.5 hours because there's a lot of detail that one needs to go through. This act is not called the administrative adjudication of road traffic offences for nothing. There's a lot of admin involved. This is the website that you can log into to find out what your situation looks like. Remember, all the Tshwane and Joburg cases have already been logged in here for the last 13 years. However, all the other authorities, as they go online, you'll be able to get your information here. There's room to register either as an individual or as a proxy. And you can also check and see what your outstanding fines look like. They are not going to transfer the criminal procedure fines to this. So if you have fines like that, they will stay on their systems. This will be the R2 fines that will be on here. Just a quick note as far as service is concerned. The service of documents have been changed completely. If you have a look at the new legislation, you will see there's a lot of stuff that can be served by ordinary mail. There's still a lot of confusion out there among the people. There's a specific regulation dealing with this. There's in fact 4 regulations dealing with service. Sorry, I see when this was transferred into this format, it looks a little different than on my slides. Apologies for that. If you have a look at your service by a personal service, please take note, personal service does not mean they have to find you personally. It means it's served personally from the authority side. So as far as personal service is concerned, they can serve to your receptionist, they can serve to a gate guard, it's considered to be served, but most of the time, personal service will happen next to the road where they actually stop you and charge you. Then as far as electronic service and registered mail service is concerned, the Act still requires that all notifications of demerit points must be sent by registered mail. Most of the other notices will be sent by ordinary mail, and anything that they are allowed to send by ordinary mail, they can also email to you. My personal advice to all of you out there is to go and create 2 email addresses. You all have domains where you get your emails, create a proxy, and perhaps use the last 4 numbers of your business registration for every one of your branches and say proxy 1101 or whatever, and create that email address, keep it manned, and ensure that you get your emails there. Time is the friend of the proxy in this process. You have 32 days to nominate drivers or pay and get discounts. So waiting for post is not a good idea. If you register and you provide your email details to them, you will be able to get all your documents like that. Same with your representative. And it will make it much easier for you to deal with these things than having to wait for the mail to get to you and to do something then. They've also extended the time period within which they are allowed to serve you. One of the main issues of the original legislation was the fact that the 40 days was just too tight to get the stuff to you because of the post office. That has now been extended to 60 days. So from date of infringement, they have the right to serve you within 60 days. That means 50 days in after your notification, they must send it to you. And then once that has been sent to you, you have 10 days within which to deal with it and to be regarded as being served. So even if you don't open your emails, if you don't go and fetch it at the post office, it is still considered served. So please take note, the ostrich approach is not working with the AARTO system. As far as the presumption is concerned, regardless of what the last known address was that you gave to the authorities, 10 days after that, it is presumed it was served there. There's provisions in the road traffic legislation that makes it an offence if you do not change your address within 21 days. So failing to do that is an additional offence. You can't use that as an excuse to say you didn't get it. You'll just be charged for that as well. So please take note. And if you have received it late, you must make an affidavit on an AARTO 8 to show that that is the case. Think about it if you want to do that, because in future there's room for reservice. The AARTO system allows reservice of notices. And if you tell them that the reason why you're making a representation is that you got it late, they still have the opportunity to reserve it to you right up to 180 days after the notice. So unless you are missing out on being able to nominate someone or getting a discount, I won't go through all that trouble to tell them that it's 5 days late. Rather carry on and deal with it. As far as the nomination is concerned, the duty of the owner, please note that this is extremely important. AARTO does not cater for a scenario where you can pay fines on behalf of drivers. If you do that and you have not nominated the driver, those notices will be in your name, and the demerit points, if any, would go against your vehicle license. It will not go to that driver. So please note, it's a very busy slide, and hopefully you'll be able to see the information there. The legislation was amended to change it from an offence to not know who's driving your vehicle to remaining liable. It's a big difference. In the system as it stands now, before the amendment, they can charge you for not telling them who was driving the vehicle. And the new system, they're simply saying, if you don't tell us who was driving, we accept it was the owner, and we carry on as if the owner was the driver of the vehicle. If your nomination is not successful, then you remain responsible. So if you provide wrong details, or if the person doesn't exist or something like that, then that would be regarded as unsuccessful. They've also introduced a new option. It's called a registered fleet, interface fleet user. And if you have a lot of traffic fines, you can register with them. I have the interface back here in the office if you're interested. It sets the parameters for being able to create an interface with the system. And you can then, in a few days before they issue notices, you would be entitled to provide your driver details and your driving license card details of the driver that you want to nominate. And instead of first sending the notice to you, and then you have to nominate the driver again, you could actually directly interface with the RTIA. You could nominate the actual driver, and the first notice would already go to them. So please note, they are already doing this. There are many companies that's already logged onto this interface. You just need to ensure that your system can talk to theirs to be able to do that. If you cannot manage to do that, then the normal AARTO 7 process would be the way in which to nominate. But it is important to understand that if you provide wrong information, if it's false, if the person that you've nominated indicates that they were somewhere else, then that notice just comes back to you and you would be responsible for it. If we look at the demerit point information, if you have a look at the slide there, you'll see that the decision was taken to introduce the demerit points only from the 1st of July 2022. Initially, there was some talks that they wanted to implement it as they roll it out, but I think that would have been subject to constitutional challenges. That is the national sport these days in South Africa. So I cannot see anybody who would have left that one alone. So it has been decided to wait until the legislation is everywhere before they start with the demerit points. They are going to introduce it in 3 phases. The first one would be for speeding, which unfortunately is about 95% of all our traffic fines are generated through that system. Then your drunken driving, reckless driving, those kind of things, hazardous behavior, passing on solid lines when you can't see over hills, things like that. And then your roadworthy requirements will also carry demerit points. So in phase 1, those would be the only 2 types of infringements, your driver behavior and your roadworthy infringements and offences. In phase 2, which may be more than a year later, depending on how the department feels how to implement, they will add overloading, dimension charges, dangerous goods charges, etc. And the third phase would be more your administrative stuff, failing to comply with updating proxy details, address details, etc. The penalties will obviously be introduced on the 1st of October with the first 67 municipalities. The fines have never been raised in the AARTO system over the entire time it was in force. So it was a 50 Rand per penalty unit value. And the fines were for a maximum of 1,500 Rand. So with the demerit point discounts that with the discounts that you get, you would not pay more than 750. Whereas the criminal system actually allows for fines up to 5,000 Rand. So the new ones that will be introduced is 3,500 as a max for your more serious stuff, right up to 2 demerit units, which is 200 Rand for pedestrian and cyclist fines and so forth. So those are just a very quick rundown as far as the points are concerned. This is a very busy slide, but I think it just warrants a minute of discussion. There are 3 different groups of entities that can get demerit points. Natural person, like you and me, owning our own private vehicle, we will never get demerit points for our vehicles. We get demerit points against our driving license. The operators can be either a natural person or a company, and that is for all the vehicles you have that have got double discs, where your trucks, buses, taxis, etc. And the third group that was introduced in this last Amendment Act is your juristic person who's not an operator. They are the group of vehicles that belong to companies, but they have single discs. That's the easiest way to explain it. The opportunity to get points against the license disc exists, and for the operator, it will be against the operator card. So if you just run through who gets what, a natural person will be getting demerit points against their driving license or against their driver record. They will not get points for their vehicle, and the points they will be getting will either be for the stuff they get charged for straight out, like being stopped for talking on your cell or something, or if they are the owner of a vehicle and they receive a traffic fine through the mail, where it's assumed they are the owner. So if you share a vehicle with someone else, that person was responsible for the infringement. You must nominate them, otherwise the demerit points will go against your name. If you're looking at your operators, the operators will be receiving points against an operator card. And the proxy will not be getting any points. There's been a lot of rumors about that. That is not correct. 15 points is the maximum in all instances for driving licenses, operator cards, and license discs. If you go over 15 points, you get a 3-month suspension or disqualification for every point exceeding that 15 points. Operators will also be charged for offences and infringements committed by their drivers. If the driver is not legally licensed, there will be demerit points for that, or if the vehicle is not roadworthy, also points. And then for your offences regarding dangerous goods transport, overloading, etc., that will only come in phase 2. And then also, if you do not nominate your drivers for speeding fines and red traffic signal infringements, you will also carry those points if you just pay those fines. Juristic persons who are not operators, exactly the same scenario as your operator, except you will not be getting fines for other charges, only roadworthiness. This is new. So if you have a bakkie out there that belongs to the company and the driver gets charged for a smooth tire, he's going to get a traffic fine with his demerit points, and then they will generate a second traffic fine for the company saying you have not controlled the roadworthiness of your vehicle. The main one where they will be getting demerit points is your speeding fines and your traffic signal fines, all your camera stuff, if you have not nominated the driver. The moment you nominate the driver, those points go away. They will be against the driver with his driving license. If you pay the fine in the company's name or you cannot tell them who drove the vehicle, you will be responsible for those. Then there's a few things that people have always wondered about as far as what happens to the points as far as the operators and the company vehicles are concerned. Please take note. The moment you have more than 15 points, either on an operator card or on a vehicle license, the vehicle will be suspended. You cannot sell it during that time because you are not allowed to drive it out on the road. You must go and hand all documents in which are suspended. And during that time, that vehicle is pretty much furniture in the yard. You cannot use it. When the vehicle has now reduced down to 15 points, you are allowed to sell it, but please take note, there have been guys out there that are saying that the demerit points punish vehicles. That is not true. The demerit points punish the owner of the vehicle or the operator of the vehicle. So if you sell a vehicle with 15 points, you do not sell the points. The points remain with the BRN of the company. The person who receives the vehicle gets a new unencumbered vehicle. There's no problem for him to license and use the vehicle. You will then get the next vehicle you buy of the same type, either operator card vehicle or a vehicle that's with a juristic person tag to it. That type of vehicle will receive those points. So it will make no difference whether you keep or sell the vehicle, you keep the points. There's no difference there. The same will happen if you export a vehicle or if it gets reported as stolen or if it gets scrapped. Under all of those circumstances, that BRN remains in place on the system together with those demerit points. They won't pile all the demerit points of 5 vehicles onto one. There's that question too. They will scatter them as you have them for the individual vehicles. They will be added to the new vehicles. Then there's just a few example pages here. This is the new draft offences schedule that will come out. You will see that there are certain things which are offences and others which are infringements. All the references to the Schedule 3 is either from the National Road Traffic Act or the AARTO legislation. There's about 4 offences in there or infringements. And then the National Land Transport Act and the Cross Border Act are now also included in here. And you will see that there's a opportunity. Sorry, I see the slides have disappeared here. If you have a look at the provisions in the legislation, you'll see there's room for an infringement. Then there's the penalty value, there's a demerit points if that is in place, and then also a charge code. So the one that you see there in front of you now is Section 42, which deals with failure to control the roadworthiness of your vehicle. So it's a good example. If you have a look at the top one there, the second one from the top, you'll see there's a charge code 2299, which shows that if the driver was charged for the specific infringement, then he will receive a fine, but then you will see there's a 2299 is the charge just below that. So your juristic person who's not an operator will then receive this as a second fine to the company saying, you've allowed somebody to drive this vehicle while it wasn't roadworthy. There are many of them. So 2299 is a standard fine that will come to the company regardless of what the driver was charged for roadworthiness offences. And then you will see that in some instances, there are no demerit points, and in other instances, there are demerit points. If we look, for example, I'm very sorry, let me just reverse it back to the previous slide. If you have a look at that one, you'll see that your operator charges. So where the operator is being charged for various offences, I haven't made a screenshot of all of them. The previous charge is, for example, where the driver doesn't have a professional driving permit. There is a 4-point demerit points for the operator under those circumstances. General driver behaviour is generally not charged through the operator. The operator will then also receive charges for overloading, failure to comply with dangerous goods provisions, as well as roadworthiness. And for the roadworthy offence, you will see there is a 4 demerit point every time. So regardless of what the original infringement from the driver is, that could be anything from a 2 demerit, from 0 demerit points to being arrested. As far as the driver is concerned, there's a sliding scale as far as the seriousness is concerned. The offence or the infringement for the operator is always the same. You failed to control your business. But only the roadworthy offences and failing to ensure your driver is legally licensed will carry demerit points initially. The others will only be introduced at the later stage. Sorry, we've already addressed that one. Things that we discuss in detail in our training sessions is how this impacts the proxies, as well as the drivers. What kind of rules and stuff do you need to have in place? The fact that the driver needs to give you permission to look at its demerit points, etc. Things that you need to look at from a vehicle use perspective, whether your policies in your company is actually aligned with AARTO. Many companies still have policies that will actually be contrary to the AARTO legislation, like I'll pay your fine and deduct it from your salary and stuff like that. Labor issues are not addressed in the AARTO Act at all. You must deal with your labor issues and see that your labor rules that you have in place actually coincides with what's in AARTO. Otherwise, you may find yourself in trouble there. And all of your subcontractors, you must also check now, because remember, they can also have suspensions against their operator cards, which would also result in you not being able to move your product if you are relying on subcontractors. Especially your one-man shows, because they will be getting points against the individual PRDP, and they will also be getting points against the operator card. If we look at what needs to happen now, in the next, 7 or 8 days, they need to publish 2 proclamations from the president's side to indicate which municipalities are going to be receiving AARTO first. The entire set of regulations, the entire set has been redrafted together with all the schedules, all the forms, everything will be new. And it is a very bulky gazette. It has also been translated into Afrikaans. So basically there will be a huge gazette that must be published to allow AARTO to come into force on the 1st of October. So I'm very sorry this was very quick. I didn't explain any of the basic principles. This is just the changes to the legislation. I hope I'm not too far out of my time, Patrick. If you have any other questions, you are welcome to contact us, either Lizette or myself, if you want some more information. And as far as I know, Kaylee said that she's going to send these few slides to you guys as well. Thank you very much.
Man, I've got to applaud you for condensing her. And also, you didn't talk too fast, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Presentation. To all delegates, please note that Alta does run courses, is running courses. You've got her details there. Please contact her, because it is a very complex subject. But I just want to say one thing, where 95% of the fines are for speeding. I've been on many roads where the speed limits are ridiculous. They are supposed to be there for road safety. But under AARTO, everyone is going to get nailed. I've actually stopped that speeding at cops on site and said, guys, this is a revenue earning road. And they've agreed with me. So I think what we have to do is call the road engineers, and, speed limits are part of road safety. And under AARTO, you're going to get speed limits where, there's a 60-kilometer speed limit, and 80 on the R511, which is a brilliant road. And everyone's going to get caught on the road to Swanepoel. The cops agreed with me. They said, no, this should be 100. So, yeah, little things like that we have to deal with as we go forward.
Patrick, I can butt in for 1 second and just tell you there's an entire new set of manuals that's coming out, where they will have to certify all the speeds on all the roads in the country. SANRAL is the main driver of that process, and they are busy trying to get only road engineers to set speed limits and not the traffic officials. So there is such a process is in place, but it has been going on for a few years now. Hopefully it's nearing the end. You may find that it will actually be introduced soon.
That is brilliant news, because that's a real concern, And then the other thing, ladies and gentlemen, the operators out there, please, I just want to remind you, in our break and tire watch, which we haven't been able to do for a year and a half, we still fail 69% of vehicles. Now, Alta has highlighted the roadworthiness of vehicles as a very big issue here. Please ensure your vehicles are roadworthy. Preventative maintenance, it's still going on to this day. So please, that's it. Now, to move on to a very, very, this is going to be great. We've got Bobby Shemmans, who's HSSE executive for Imperial, who actually walked the road, and they were in mad panic. And I'm sure I also did a bit of a survey around operators before July the 1st, when it was supposed to come in, and said, how many of you are ready? And very few were ready. And Bobby was working on it with his massive team for ages and still wasn't ready, I don't think. Hey, Bobby, it was a nightmare to get compliance. And so we've headed this. Now is the time to get ready. That's the title of this. Don't wait until 1 minute to midnight. And Bobby's going to show you why you should not do that. So, Bobby, thank you so much for being with us today. This is an operator who walked the walk, and now he's going to talk his walk. Over to you, Bobby.
Patrick, thank you for the introduction and also the opportunity for us to share a bit on our journey to compliance. AARTO did touch on some of the issues and the aspects that we need to think of when a business wants to implement a policy or a framework to comply with AARTO. And I hope to share a little bit on that journey, although it's a continuous journey that we go through on a continuous basis. But yeah, what a privilege to be here today. So I'm just going to move on and give a little bit of a background in terms of who Imperial is. So Imperial is a proudly South African business, organization that was born in 1994 in Johannesburg, and ever since got quite a wide global footprint in 26 different countries. We currently employ approximately 25,000 people. And we ranked amongst the top 30 global logistics businesses within the global scope. So you can imagine with quite a strong presence within the southern African part of the continent, AARTO plays a magnificent and an intense role in the way we do business and the way we transport our products on the South African roads. And that basically led us to a point where we needed to recap and just reevaluate where we are in terms of compliance and what is needed in order for us to meet the needs for AARTO. I'm just going to go over to this brief introduction.
We are going to ensure that there is education. People will be educated about the law that is in place and all the time and so on, so that when you get penalties, you also understand the law. People must come to the party in terms of this. So we will not win it alone.
Corrupt traffic offenders will be dealt with, while those who do good will be celebrated. That's according to
Thank you, Kylie. So this clip was basically released a few days after President Ramaphosa signed this into legislation. And although AARTO has been around since 1998 for approximately 20 plus years, this really struck home for us. And we got to a point where we actually asked the question, where do we start? How do we start aligning to this expectations? How do we meet the AARTO requirements? So it created a little bit of panic, and panic is not always a bad place to start off from. And we had to realize that for us to find a starting point, it is important for us to understand exactly what the requirements are and what the expectations of AARTO should be. Thereafter, we had to move forward and treat this as any other management system that we would implement. Assess the impact. What would the risk be to the business? What do we need to change in order to align before we can actually put a proper plan and a plan of execution together? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the assessment of the impact and maybe assist those businesses that are currently operating in that space and thinking of implementing a framework or a policy, and maybe I hope to leave you guys with some thoughts and tools to think about when you guys are implementing this whole process and embarking on this journey. So for us, in order to, like I said before, in order for us to find a departing point, we had to understand exactly what the requirements and the expectations of the AARTO legislation would be, and we tapped into a lot of resources, AARTO's workshops, assisted very, very much in terms of getting our key stakeholders within the organization up to a certain standard where we can actually start to have some meaningful engagement around AARTO. But sometimes simple things like picking up a phone and phoning Mr. Baloy and the team at RTIA also assisted us greatly in terms of just providing a bit of guidance and setting that basis for us to understand, whether we are on the right track and where do we need to tweak. So there's a lot of information out there that's available that can be tapped into. Imperial, as quite a large organization, are fortunate to have a legal counsel that assisted us greatly in the interpretation of the legislation as well in some aspects. Once we had that first foundation of understanding of what the AARTO Act really entails and what the expectations is, we could then tap into the external or the internal platforms that's already available to us. We, for example, have health and safety conferences on an annual basis where most of the businesses get together and the key stakeholders and decision makers get together. And we could then have meaningful collaboration sessions and brainstorming sessions in terms of where the gaps lie and what needed to be done in order to get that set up. The reason why I'm mentioning this is especially for the businesses that are operating in the space that are currently grappling in order to find a way to start. These are the platforms that work for us. Those exco sessions, those board sessions, and even the use of internal surveys. There's a lot of material online that can be used that you can test the understanding of AARTO internally. And make decisions based on that in terms of how you would shape and form your framework. Essentially, what came out of those journey of collaboration and engagement internally was the next four, if I can call it that, summarized risks or impacts that we've identified. The first one, and it was touched on the previous speaker's presentation, is the liability on us as an employer. AARTO is very, very specific in terms of frameworks and time frames or time windows that you need to respond to whenever you receive an infringement notice. And failing to do so could place liability back to us as an employer. And there could also be quite a significant financial impact to the business as well in not managing this whole process according to the expectations. One of the issues that popped up as well was the high employee turnover potential for the business. We are unsure of what the impact of employees' behavior outside the scope of work would be, and the impact it would have on their ability to actually perform functions where it is required to operate company vehicles, and also the fact that licenses could be suspended. So we were unsure in terms of what that impact would be, and we perceived that and still perceive that as a risk to the business. Also, with a high employee turnover, you introduce a lot of new applicants into the business, and that actually elevates your risk for safety performance. So if there's a greater turnover, your safety risk also escalates. The next important point was the upkeep of our customer service levels. In the face of these incapacity, if a license has been suspended or an operator card, that creates a shortfall in your capacity. And how do you actually continue to meet the need of your customers? So a very, very important point that we had to think about. And I think lastly is probably one of the most obvious, but also one of the greater impacts or the risk to the business as well, is the administrative burden that AARTO places on us as an organization. For smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses, it is definitely going to be an administrative issue. But if you're dealing with about 9,000 drivers or 11,000 employees within a country, that becomes something that you surely need to consider. And with that comes immense financial implication. Are we going to appoint a dedicated team that specifically looks after the administration of AARTO, or how is that going to look? Just waiting for the next slide. So through these collaborative sessions, I think quite a number of valuable thoughts came out as we were shaping the policy. So it was unanimously decided that we need to create a framework to address AARTO and to structureize how we approach AARTO as a business. And one of the key issues, or the first points that came up, was the aspect of employee incapacity. So businesses will have to think about, how do you handle this? How do you as a business deal with licenses being suspended, especially around functions that primarily makes use of company assets to drive with. Remember there's a 3-month suspension for every point exceeding 15. So that would be the minimum duration of a suspended license. So if an employee comes to you with 18 points, that's going to mean he's going to be suspended. The license is going to be suspended for about 9 months. And what do you do in that case? So most companies opt for the incapacity route or the termination. So if that is the case, then prior engagement with the unions is essential. Sooner than later, you don't want any complications when the time comes when licenses are being suspended. The other matter, when the route of incapacity or termination is followed, that means that there's going to be a recruitment process that's going to be taking place. And I did mention that recruitment, bringing in new drivers continuously into the organization, elevates your risk for safety. The other issue would also be the availability of quality or professional drivers. I'm just thinking about the space where the passenger side or the dangerous goods side, those are specific types of drivers that you need to employ, and that pool is normally quite small considering the industry in South Africa. So those are stuff that you need to consider. Where are you going to source drivers? What are the sources of those applicants? Also, part of your recruitment process, businesses need to think of, and that's what we grappled with for quite some time, is what would be an acceptable threshold. So if an applicant applies for a position and he presents to you a certificate that shows that he's got 13 points, what would that be an acceptable threshold to consider employment? So those are typical things that businesses need to think of and include in the framework or the policy when they implement the AARTO system. Training and induction programs, very, very important. We're thinking a lot about this and the need to differentiate between functional training and normal awareness training is important. Functional training more for your AARTO representatives that you would employ or appoint, and then also your awareness training for the rest of the employees. Think about the frequency of the training. How often would that occur? Would it be refresher? Would it be full training? Those kind of needs to be outlined in that framework. Further to that was quite a hot topic that we needed to discuss was, how do we actually access that information? How do we actually keep track of employees' points so that we can proactively intervene when the time comes? And also an important factor is the POPIA Act. How does that influence that access to information as well? So for us as a business, we need to be able to justify why do you need the information, what the information is used for, and for how long you're going to keep that as well. So for us, the decision that we've taken is we've differentiated between critical and non-critical drivers. Critical being employees that primarily operates company vehicles from time to time or as part of the function. That would then justify the need for us to have access to that. Then there's an AARTO 27 process or a consent process where each employee will then have to give consent for the business to actually have access to those points. When you're dealing with 9,000 drivers, it becomes quite a tedious and administrative process. But nevertheless, it's important to get that, to think about that and outline how you're gonna think about getting consent and access to those points. The other aspect that was also touched on earlier is the access to vehicle information. In order to get that, your proxy will have to register on the link provided on the AARTO website, which will then enable you to see any demerit points or status updates based on your operator cards or you as an employer. So some of the hurdles that we're currently facing, and there is a lot of technology in the market or software in the market that can interface or provide you with information on demerit point statuses. Currently, we in the process of looking at software interfacing with the demerit point system data. That has not yet been finalized. We are currently in the process. Continuous discussions with the RTIA and the team, Henty and the team over there. Also, the pre-dispatching verification. Previously, the AARTO website had a function where you can actually check the driver's license status, whether it wouldn't give you the amount of points or demerit points allocated against that particular employee's license, but it would actually tell you whether the license is valid or not. That functionality has been removed. It has been taken up with the RTIA, and hopefully shortly before the demerit points portion of the act would kick in, that would be available to us. And then also one of the hurdles that we need to overcome is I think that the points that we touched on as well is the administrational burden to the business. How do we manage that effectively and stay on top of it? So. In a nutshell, that is basically just a few pointers. Thank you for the time, and yeah, so that's it, Patrick.
Yeah, sure. That is the road that Bobby and them have walked. Bobby, thank you so much for sharing that. I must say, I also compliment you for coming out as a transporter. Transporters are sometimes very reluctant to share internal processes towards improvement. And Bobby, I really thank you very, very much for sharing that road. As you can see, it's not an easy road to walk. And that's why we said now is the time to get ready. And please take account of what Bobby has said, some of those pitfalls that he's in, some of the hurdles that they come, some of the challenges, many challenges that are there to face. And Bobby, once again, thank you. I'm going to ask one question. We're running quite on time. We're running to a strict time. But question to Mr. Shemmans. Alta mentioned a few infringement types. Example, speed, drunk driving, not stopping at stop sign. This comes from Leandra Anamali. What, in your opinion, is the biggest infringement risk which could lead to demerits and suspended licenses, Bobby?
I think the typical traffic violations, there's not stopping at stop streets, speeding, those kind of things, stopping in illegal or unauthorized places, especially with dangerous goods vehicles. Those are the typical fines. But I think just thinking back now, I think don't neglect weighbridge infringements or overloading. That's a big, massive factor in the transport industry as well. So those little axle overloads and those kind of things, don't neglect that.
And I would add to that roadworthiness of vehicles. So, Bobby, there's a lot of vehicles out there that are unroadworthy, and that's most people when they talk about transport, they look at Imperial, they look at the bigger companies, but the majority of trucks in the hands of the small to medium-sized operators. Some of them are fantastic, some of them are absolutely terrible, and so they're going to get hurt and they're going to get off. And I think on that side, I'm just going to make a quick one. I don't know who it was who said that, look on the bright side, in 6 months, the roads are going to be empty. It's a joke, but could be true. Okay, thank you, Bobby. I'm going to get to the end. Alta, maybe you can just switch your camera on and quickly deal with this one question. Are they going to apply AARTO to non-SA registered vehicles, SADC registered vehicles running through South Africa? Are you there, AARTO? Before we go to Henry? Okay, we'll come back to that. Now we're going to introduce Telematics is probably one of the most exciting developments that have taken place in years for the transport industry. I'll tell you, you coming in. Alta, let's just quickly go to that question. I'm going to repeat it. Are they going to apply AARTO to non-SA registered vehicles, SADC registered vehicles running through South Africa?
Yes, Patrick. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
They are. If you have a look at the last regulations that will be published soon, they have taken out any reference to different treatment of foreigners. South Africa also signed an agreement with 27 of our neighboring states to have what they call a trip system, where South African demerit points will be allocated to those guys' licenses there, and theirs will be here. So the idea is that foreign drivers that's in South Africa they will record the demerit points on the system on either on their traffic register numbers or on their foreign passports. And the idea is that they will be subject to exactly the same rules as the South African guys.
Right, there's the answer to that question. That's good or bad news for foreigners, but please take note of it. Henry Smith, now over to Henry. As I was saying, and telematics, very exciting development over the years in transport. And the telematics companies are actually looking, like Mixed Telematics, on how to help your operators, how to help everybody to manage this. Bobby mentioned software packages, and Henry's going to tell us how the Mixed Telematics is coming forward to help you manage this very intensive administration process. Over to you, Henry.
Thanks, Patrick, and thank you for the opportunity to you and the FleetWatch team. And I also want to extend a big thank you to all the attendees, our partners, and our customers. To assist our customers and all the transporters across various sectors, anything from a little scooter bike to big 18-wheelers, in coming up with solutions that drives compliance. And I think part of that, we've proved it with the ELD conformance in Europe. We've done it in terms of the hours of service in North America, the Petrom regulations that's relevant in terms of the oil and gas industry. And we're approaching AARTO in exactly the same way. We believe that both our transporters and our drivers are valuable assets, and that we need to come up with real solutions for these challenges. And I think we've got enough management data to our availability today, and the large vehicle pool that we're managing across many sectors to do so, and to do so effectively. I'm not going to go through the whole AARTO component again. I think Alta has done it extensively well in a really short time. I do think what's really, really important in terms of just understanding AARTO is just to understand that everybody that's on the road today is going to be covered by the AARTO legislation. And I think Alta has gone into great detail in terms of what is an operator with it. I think the one thing that stands out for us quite extensively is the importance of real actionable data and the access to actionable data to, one, either confirm that an incident or a transgression has taken place, and or two, to disprove the fact that a transgression has taken place. We understand that the challenges is that we've got in the country in terms of legislation and the follow-through on legislation. And I think it's up to us as service providers just to make sure that we provide the industry with those types. It's very important that although in phase one we're looking at the really big ticket items in terms of speeding and everything else that goes with it, if we go through Schedule 3 of the Act, we will see that it's actually going to follow through, talk to roadworthy, licensed roadworthies, everything that both Alta and Bobby has mentioned in their presentations. And we need to understand the importance to cover all of this when we approach AARTO and when we approach the accessibility to data, and when we build tools to enable our transporters to effectively address any thrown their way. Because it could either be, as Alta has mentioned, or I think Alta has mentioned, it could either be a slippery tire or it could be overloading. And what we need to think about when we implement this is we need to think about the whole spectrum that ultimately will be covered by Schedule 3. So, and in short, it means that all that's excluded from that is the really serious offences. I think, again, Alta has gone through what that entire process looks like in terms of what happens when I've received an infringement. I think the one thing that it does for us as a telematics service provider, it underpins the importance of accurate, easy data, whether one that would allow one to either confirm an incident, as I've mentioned before, and or for us to make sure that we can discard that in terms of a real incident. In terms of the tool to manage compliance, we believe it is an all hands on deck scenario where we need to make sure that we access the vehicle telematics, the video telematics, the software as a service that's available to us, any value added services that's provided by telematics service providers. We need to build that real-time telematics and real-time analytics that we can present to our customers. And then we need to also make sure that we integrate this data in terms of strategic partners, whether it's with retail or any of the other multitudes of service providers that's going to offer these services, to create visibility for our transporters and for our operators, just to make it really easy for them. So it's not a one size fits all. It's more an all hands on deck type of approach to the solution. So in terms of a turnkey solution, as I've mentioned before, I really think this needs to go back to the telematic solutions that they've got in play today and make sure that they understand every single data point that's available to them, that will allow them to either confirm a traffic violation or the location of the vehicle or the solution that was offered, and make sure that they get that data. So as I've mentioned before, your vehicle telematics, your in-vehicle telematics, your logistics delivery management tools, if you've got a routing and planning tool, the data that comes from that. If you're running hours of service compliance, the hours of service compliance, most probably one of the most simplest solutions is something as simple as a driver tag or a driver tag solution, and understanding the value that has within the business. And I'm going to unpack some of these just very briefly in terms of where we believe there's actionable data points with actionable data that we can execute on. The first of those being obviously in-vehicle telematics, whether it's video telematics or vehicle telematics. As I've mentioned before, starting with something as simple as a driver tag. Driver tag confirms who's driven the vehicle. We've spoken extensively on the importance of being able to allocate the correct driver. So again, perspective, we can also do driver access control. So there where we do sit with drivers that's run out of demerit points and or assets that's run out of points, we can disable those vehicles from operating and not accidentally putting either the driver or the vehicle back on the road. And then the real-time management data that goes with it. So again, confirm the location of the data and confirm whether such a transgression in the case of speeding and so forth has actually taken place. One step up from that is obviously where we start adding video telematics into that picture. I think we've seen a great shift from basic video telematics to video telematics that today has artificial intelligence. Us greatly in terms of driver training and coaching to make sure that we, from a preventative perspective, can train our drivers on potential challenges that will come in terms of Schedule 3 of the offences. So the first, obviously, is video-based driver information, so confirmation of who's actually driven the vehicle, video-based evidence of the location of the vehicle, vehicle-based evidence of either transgression or not, video-based evidence on traffic stops. I think it's going to become very, very, very important moving forward. We all understand the demographics of, and I think having that impartial information available is really, really important. Then things that leads to speeding and non-stopping, things like distracted driving, fatigue, those type of things, assistant lane departures in terms of using indicators and everything else that goes with it. So, the list goes on and on. So I think when it comes to in-vehicle telematics and video telematics, as much as it's been used in the past to drive the driver behavior and the vehicle utilization, I think most probably the two quickest wins is just to utilize that, but to set it up data in terms of your requirements, in terms of AARTO. As we've heard earlier, non-core assets such as leased and rental fleet or subcontract is equally important. So there, the application of mobile applications such as MyMix tracking that uses FONUS and OBC, really, really important. Of course, the liability still remains with the operator in terms of a subcontractor to make sure that those guys adhere to the road rules and that their actions doesn't demerit. So we all understand that they 9 out of 10 times already have a telematics device prescribed by the operator, but a simple use of a mobile application such as FONUS and OBC could help and assist our operators in getting the same level of data. And then most probably, I think one of the strongest tools is the data that we collate in the back end. So from a software as a service perspective. So again, from a software and a visibility side, real-time vehicle and driver location, including the transgressions in terms of driver behavior. Today, with telematics, we know the road sector speeds, we know the speeds that vehicles are driving, and we also know zone speed. Just to make sure, in terms of vehicle type, that we comply in terms of the regulations and the legislation that's out there. Equally important is managing driver legal requirements. So whether it's single disc or double disc, so whether it's just the driver's license or the PDP, making sure that those are in place before a trip takes place. And then managing the vehicle legal requirements, so license renewals, roadworthies, all of those things are going to become more and more important as time goes on. And then I think one of the things that would add a whole bunch of value in terms of moving forward, especially confirming a pre-trip and post-trip, as well as the recording of incidents, is something as simple as our MyMix driver application, where we enable drivers is to have access to the real-time data, so the driver sees at the exact same time as what the vehicle records any potential driver behavior. So again, using that as a coaching tool to make sure that we empower the drivers to understand where they are in terms of transgressions and or speeding events and everything else that goes with it, and allow them to manage themselves to be more compliant with the risk profile that goes with it. In terms of value-added services, there's a lot of fleet bureaus around today. We at Mix obviously have a specialized risk mitigation center, which is called Mix Track and React. Again, from a preventative and a preemptive perspective, really important to make use of tools like that. One of our biggest successes in driving down accidents within transporters is putting vehicles into our Track and React center and proactively managing potential speeding events. So time gets the instruction to reduce his speed, and therefore preventing the incident from becoming penalizable before it does. So a really great tool to be used in that role. Something as there's a couple of report my driving centers around the country for those small operators that says, but guys, we don't typically have somebody that sit behind a screen and can watch our vehicles all day. You know, for a couple of bob, you can outsource this, and you can get great value from crowdsourcing in terms of people reporting on your driver's behaviors out on the road, and that includes those small things such as not stopping at things that once in phase 2 is implemented will come back to bite us. I know initially we're all focusing on speed and speed heavily, and fatigue and speed are the two biggest killers in the industry. But it's going to make its way through to the rest. So, something as simple as report my driving, really, really important. With that, we also have a solution called MyMix Mobile Task Management. It talks a little bit to the MyMix driving application. But here we've got the ability to, in a single platform, do pre and post trip inspections on vehicles, making sure that vehicles are roadworthy before when they return to the depot. So if there's been an incident, one has that proof on hand to be able to provide, the data that one would need for the legal process. And also, very importantly, you could even build a process flow to record what happens in a case where there's a traffic stop. So where there's a specific SOP within the company, as Imperial is implemented, make sure that that's recorded consistently and executed consistently by all users throughout the system. And back to the fatigue side of it, we all know that the distracted driver or fatigue driver, the less alert they are, the bigger the probability in terms of incidents such as speeding and reckless driving and everything else that goes with it. The crux of all of this is obviously just to make sure that at the end of the day, all of this data is accessible. It talks to the business. We've heard both Bobby and Alta talk about the admin burden. AARTO is going to add an admin burden, and I think from a telematics, make sure that we record so much data today. I think it's a well documented fact that 80% of the data that's available in the world today has been produced in the last 2 years. So the risk that we're standing here is just to have just more death by data. And I really think it's important to make sure that the data that we work on is actionable and actually talks to the business. So again, from a big data perspective, I know Bobby hasn't spoken about it in his presentation, but for instance, if we take Imperial, where they've built a data lake and starting to bring all of these different data, make sure that your service provider provides you with that. We within Mix have got 2 applications in that world. Inside Agility is something that sits at a customer level, that even within our software allow them to build dashboards that talks to their business. So things like roadworthy, the Demerit Points, all of those type of things could be in there. And then obviously if we want a more holistic predictive analytics platform, we've got Insight Analyzer that allows us to really present our customers with big data. And then I think the last part of it is really making sure that on strategic partnerships, we need to make sure that we understand our regulator. We need to make sure that we're close to our regulator, and we need to make sure that we tap into their regulator every way we can. So, for instance, in the RTIA perspective, we at Mix today are working very closely, like most of you are, with the likes of Rita, to understand the integrations that we can build that will allow our transporters to, from a single platform and from a single point, manage something as simple as just doing we're trying to drive the integration down to the level from a telematics perspective, where we know who the driver is, we know what their status is, we know whether they were in that location where the offence was committed or allegedly committed, and we can bring those worlds together in real time, which means that by the time the notice is issued, the notice actually goes to the correct driver and doesn't even go to the proxy or the company. So those are the things that we believe is really important. I don't think there's any silver bullet stuff. I think it's all stuff we know. It's all stuff we use on a daily basis. We remain calm and we remain level-headed. We will drive the results. And I think the value of this talks to itself. So from an integrated perspective, we all understand the cost benefit of an integrated approach. And so by having this and having an integrated approach, and even with the burden of AARTO that's been added onto this, is we believe that if we utilize all the data points and all the solutions that's to our ability, the average customer out there, and especially a customer that we can only talk about our own statistics, but we've seen in our world where we've investment is a 10 to 1. So as much as it is capital intensive, or it is financially intensive from an OPEX perspective, we still believe that providing all of these data points and providing meaningful real world solutions, that we can drive those that level of ROI in terms of our customers. And Pat, that is us for this presentation. Again, all our contact details are out there. If you need any assistance in understanding what we can do in more depth, more detail, please reach out to us so that we can.
Right. Okay. Alta, thank you, Henry. Thank you so much. It's amazing. Telematics, I was around there in the early 90s when it started as the matrix vehicle tracking, I think it was, and with Stefan Joss, and it was more about hijacking, getting your hijack truck. Then the developments over the years into fleet management, and now it's helping you kind of manage AARTO, which, like it or not, it's here, it's coming, and so please prepare for it. And you can see, I'm very interested that, Henry, you're saying that you're already liaising or have been with the RTIA, that's a Road Traffic Infringement Agency, see how you can help the operators and develop systems that can. But Alta and Bobby, could you come on there, please? Just put your cameras on. Want to see you. And Henry, you stay with us. I just want to say thank you to our presenters. God, we have run out of time. There are some questions. Here comes Bobby, and there's Alta. Look at them. I want to give you guys a big hand for helping the industry. Hey, really, I found this incredibly delicate. The good news is that all this will be, the presentations will be sent by email. There's a YouTube link on this webinar, so you'll have time to go through it all. But please do not wait. Start now. It's a complex system. So start now. And Alta, Bobby, Henry, from FleetWatch, all our delegates and the industry in general, thank you so much for giving up your time and your expertise to lead us through this. We say God.
My pleasure.
Okay, that's it for today. And make sure your vehicles are roadworthy. To you all.